Hello, music appreciation students, and welcome to our first video of the Renaissance period. I love this period of music so much, and I call this Renaissance reveling. I have a thing for alliteration. So, this is the Renaissance period in music. So, this will be a multi-section presentation as well. There's a lot of information in the Renaissance period, and just too much to cover in one video would be too much to cover in one lecture. And as a matter of fact, if this were a more in-depth course, you could just do, a year's worth of study on nothing but the Renaissance period. But I used to have an aversion for the Renaissance period. I used to have an aversion to a lot of classical music, to be completely frank, until I just finally gave myself a license to give it a try and decided that, I may not get it, and it may sound kind of weird to me at first, but I'm going to give this music a fair chance. And so I started listening to it, and it eventually started to grow on me. Because I think it's just really important that we have an appreciation of all music, all genres, all types. So I try to listen to a wide breadth of things, and I really have found a heart for Renaissance music and find a lot of peace in it. So I hope that you'll give it a fair shake and listen to some of the samples that we'll cover in this presentation. So, the Renaissance is around 1400 to 1600. It's a glory time in Europe. Things are just happening all over the place. If there were a time and period that I could, travel back to, visit, know that I'm not going to get an infectious disease or be murdered, I would go back to the Renaissance period, because I just can just imagine the amazing things happening at this time. So Renaissance is French for rebirth. And essentially what this is we have left the Middle Ages and creativity is blossoming. And I attribute that mainly to the fact that we have figured out the power structures. When Rome fell, there was a lack of a centralized governing body. So the church took that over and helped to unify Europe. But it took a little bit of time to get a lot of the kinks worked out. But the more calm people are, the more creative they are. And so once things were getting more established, creativity just started to blossom. And the humanistic movement comes into play as well during the Renaissance, where people are saying, humans are pretty incredible people, or pretty incredible creatures, I should say. So it was a beautiful time. Now, one thing that we don't get to do on this slideshow that I would do every semester in my face-to-face section is talk about the difference between the art of the medieval period and the art of the Renaissance, because it is incredible, the difference. Medieval art is very flat, no perspective. There's no sense of what this creature should really look like or what this person should really look like. All the pictures are like mad, disgruntled adult babies that are just, the babies they look like adults that are just smaller. And then adults, there's just no perspective. Then you get to the Renaissance, and look at this picture that's on this slide right now. Is that not amazing? And what's even more amazing is if you're a math nerd like me and you study this stuff, you learn that there are all of these incredible mathematical components at work here. And so, when this was painted, there's a sight line that goes to the vanishing point. And this whole picture, this whole painting is one big mathematical equation in the Fibonacci sequence. And it's just beautiful. You can just see the math happening here. And it's just incredible. So I'm going to draw the big X on here so that you can... Oops, that was an awful X. But you can see the math at work. It is just amazing. And I'm sorry to keep waxing on about math, but I'm a math nerd. I look for math in everything. And it just is incredible. And also the people. Look how realistic they are, and they're caught in action. It's not like medieval pictures, they're very static. where there's life in the Renaissance and characters are in motion, fabric is moving. It's really beautiful. And my favorite man, Leonardo da Vinci, was living during that time. So what's happening around the world? This is kind of hard to read. It's much clearer on the actual PowerPoint presentation than it is in this app here. But the evidence of the Renaissance begins around 1350 in Florence, Italy. Italy plays a huge role in the Renaissance. Joan of Arc's burned at the stake in 1430. The end of the War of the Roses is in 1485. 1495, Da Vinci paints his famous Last Supper. In 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. 1500, the first C-section is performed. Wrap your head around that one. The first cesarean section in the year 1500. We've come a long way. In 1501, Da Vinci paints the Mona Lisa, and then Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel in 1511. Martin Luther begins the Protestant Reformation in 1517. That would shake the world to its core. Cannot diminish the contributions of the Protestant Reformation. 1530, secular music starts making its way into the mass, shaking things up. 1553, we get our first modern violin, and then by 1595, Shakespeare writes Richard II and Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so some popular Renaissance genres. Okay, so genres are categories of music. Okay, now we will actually cover that as an element later in the semester, but for right now, just remember that it's a category of music. Okay, so there are two big overarching genres. We got our sacred and our secular during the Renaissance period. So we would say genre, big heading, on one hand would be sacred, on the left side, secular would be on the right side. So those are the the overarching genres. Then with them, we've got masses, motets, chorales for the sacred side. On the secular side, we're going to have chansons still, madrigals, and a lot of just instrumental fun music, different dances like galliards and things like that. Okay? Popular textures during this time. Polyphonic music is still very popular. We still like it. But with the Protestant Reformation, we're going to see that a texture of homophonic will take over, okay? So just remember that term when we get there, homophonic. But right now, polyphonic is the name of the game still in most music. And we start to get a sense of meter during this time, okay? So thinking back to our discussion on the element of rhythm, so meter is the grouping of beats, right? So we start to get a sense for that in the Renaissance period. It's not as strong as it will be in the Baroque, but we're getting a basic sense of meter at this time. And the common beat unit during this time is called the breve, which is like a heartbeat. Okay? Important things to remember. Oh my gosh, this is really hard to see. Basically, you can see it really well if you are viewing it on your computer from the actual PowerPoint slide and not my video here. But just remember, church is still really important. Yes, there are kings. Yes, there are rulers, but they're all answering to the Roman Catholic Church, which there's certainly a lot of corruption in the Roman Catholic Church as well. But also remember, music wasn't as accessible as it is today. So music was much more of an event when it happened, and there wasn't a lot to entertain people with. Most likely, if you were alive during this time, you would have been in the service of somebody else. So you probably would have been a farmer or another type of laborer. So you wouldn't be listening to music on the regular. It'd be a very special thing. Also remember, the loudest sound most people have heard by this time is still just a clap of thunder. And then remember, these churches are super wealthy, super powerful, and they're building these palatial cathedrals. The medieval period was the high time of building these cathedrals, but of course they're still in existence in the Renaissance period, and you can still visit a lot of them today. Henry VIII, famously, the dissolution of the monasteries destroyed a lot of England's most beautiful. But, these places were heaven on earth for these people. Going to church was an extremely important part of their lives. So, going to church and hearing this music was a really transcendental experience. All right, we're going to stop here. We'll come back with the Battle of the Faiths in our next segment. So stay tuned for that one. We'll be back soon. Bye.